Yes, and we are live. Great. Hello, guys. Thank you all for joining. Let us know where you're coming from. I think we're going to wait a couple of minutes just to let everybody who's maybe a little bit late grabbing some coffee or water or a bio break. What I just learned is a very nice one. A bio break, just a short break. So hopefully some people will still join and then we can start this awesome webinar. But let us know where you're joining from. San Jose, awesome. Canada, some very nice people coming in. Houston, Portugal, Dubai. Whoa, nice guys. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. Welcome. So many people. Great to see everybody joining live. It is always good when we see so many people joining live for these sessions. Scotland, Groningen, everywhere. So good. Well, we're really reaching everybody. So that's so nice about these webinars.
Yes. It's great.
Let's give it, I think, one more minute and then we can kick this off. Great, guys. If you're just joining in, we're just waiting 1 minute to give some people the chance to also join the webinar so that everybody can watch the full webinar. We'll give it a couple of more seconds and then we're gonna slowly kick this off and start the webinar because we have lots and lots to talk about. So we're excited to get started. Okay, are you both ready?
Oh, yes.
Let's do this.
Yep. Let's do this. Okay, guys, welcome. Welcome to the webinar, What are the 12 key behaviors of a great manager? Great that you all could join from around the world and different time zones and that you can make this work. It's always good to have a live audience, even if we can't sadly see your faces. We know you're there, so that's great. Yes, let me get this up. So this webinar is brought to you by Better Manager and by Impraise. Better Manager is a leadership development platform for managers focused around coaching, team training and technology, a great tool to actually create better managers. And so they know a lot about the topic. Also brought to you by Impraise. Impraise is a performance management platform and we help managers and HR to create better teams as well. So what will we cover today? So of course, first I'm going to introduce you to our great speakers because they have a lot to talk about and they're actually central to this whole discussion. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Then we're going to talk about the difference between a good manager and a great one, actually about the 12 key behaviors. Then we're going to talk about practical tactics, the right processes that are needed in order to implement coaching within the organization. And last but not least, we're going to talk about practical tactics that HR can implement right now, of course, because some of the processes take a little bit longer. A quick, more administrative question. Please, if you have any questions, ask them in the questions part of Livestorm and not on the chat. Why? Because it's easier for us to filter out all the questions and to actually ask them to our panel. Also, we have all our contact details at the end of this webinar. If you have any personal questions, you can always ask personal questions to any one of us as well. And last but not least, the topics that we'll be discussing today, we have a lot of extra content on that, what we will share with you at the end of this webinar as well through an email. So also this recording will be brought to you after the webinar, so you can download it. It will also be live on the website. So there's a lot of different ways you can get to this content as well. So let's get started. The speakers today. Wendy, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, I am so delighted to be here and partnering with Impraise. Thank you so much. I am the COO and co-founder of Better Manager. I've been an executive coach for 21 years, and I'm very proud to represent the company and all of our wonderful coaches around the world. I had the great benefit of being a coach at Google from 2002 to about 2008. So it makes the Project Oxygen that we're going to talk about today close to my heart. So great to be here and talk with you all.
Thank you, Wendy. So great that you're joining. We already had some awesome conversations before, but I can't wait to share them with the world as well. Chris, you're up.
Yep, great to be here. Delighted to be here for this session. And I think, the number of attendees, which is closely arriving to nearly 200, I think it shows the importance of the topic and the importance of managers in our businesses today. So I'm VP for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region for Better Manager, and also customer success for HR. I guess you wouldn't know it from looking at me, but I've been in I'm joking, the L&D learning delivery space, learning technologies, management development for 23, 24 years. Very passionate about the impact, the ripple effect that having great managers in our business can have for our organizations, and the great work that all of our businesses do. So delighted to be talking on this topic today.
Super. Thank you, Chris. It's great to have you on board as well. I think Wendy and Chris, you both get such a great dynamic together. So I think it's going to be such an interesting conversation. A little bit about me. I'm Jolene. I am marketing director at Embrace, and I'm also a manager myself. So it's very interesting to talk about these topics and these different key behaviors. I've been working for Embrace now for the last 3 years, and I just love the HR space, and I love this. Grow your people, grow your business is what we try to do with Embrace. So this is really a topic near to my heart. So I can't wait to get started.
Super.
So let's get started on the content. What's the difference between a good manager and a great manager? That's actually where we want to kick this off with. Chris, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so I'm gonna kick off this topic area, and I actually wanted to start with the question of whether we need managers in our organizations, before we get on to what's good and great. And as Wendy alluded to, talking from our experience and our DNA, which goes back to Google, so kind of reference that experience. I think there's an interesting story that some of you may or may not know, that in the very, very early days of Google, they actually asked themselves that very question. Do we need managers? We're a high-tech organization. Give us some dark rooms and some computers. We're good to go. We don't need all that heaviness of management. So they ran an experiment and actually switched off the role of manager for a number of months. And lo and behold, discovered that, yes, the role of a manager and a leader is incredibly important for team engagement, alignment, and performance, and the happiness and well-being of the organization. So they figured out that, yes, we do need managers. And then, being a very analytical organization, they wanted to discover what makes managers great. We can see some really high-performing teams over here, some very happy teams over here, very low turnover, and we can see some teams over here that maybe aren't performing as well. So this was, they set out on a research project, which Wendy just mentioned, which they codenamed Google Oxygen. And there's lots of great stuff out there on the web if you'd like to do more research around that. But Google Oxygen was, and oxygen kind of alludes to this idea that a manager is like the oxygen or lack of oxygen for a team. Maybe we've all been there at some point in our careers, with a manager that sucks the oxygen out of the room. And what they were trying to do was to try and discover and distill those key behaviors and traits that are attributes of truly high-performing managers and their teams. And through that project, they actually distilled it down to 10 key behaviors, many of which I think Wendy will be talking about today. But yeah, there definitely is a difference between good and great. And Wendy, maybe I'll hand off to you to maybe just expand on that and get into the meat of those behaviors.
Yes, and what we know is that people leave managers, not companies. So that's really one of the distinctions that make it really important to be able to invest in your managers. And at Better Manager, I often say we bring the two pieces together. If to be a good manager, you also have to be a good leader. And so when we say manager, sometimes we are also inferring leadership, which is a little bit more about how you inspire people and move people forward. But being a good manager, you really have a lot of things that you need to work on. You work on process and how to help a team move forward. But a good manager really cares deeply about their team. They really manage process, but also they help and motivate people. They help people really see how they're going to make a difference in the business and productivity. We do a lot of work on really helping managers connect with their people, because if you know that your manager cares about you, it really makes a difference in the productivity at work, how you feel, how you collaborate with others. So there's a lot of differences between just being a good manager and being a great manager. And I think Google Project Oxygen had some surprises, because as Chris said so wonderfully, they were very technical. When I was back there, Google still thought they were just purely a tech organization. And so they thought having technical skills was really the most important thing that a manager needed. Their team needed to respect them because they had good technical skills. And when they went through and did their research on Google Project Oxygen, they realized that, wow, that was not the case. And I think they were in for a surprise.
Interesting. Wendy, just a question. What is, for you, there's this misconception about that great managers are born, or that you can only be born with specific leadership skills, that it's not something that's actually something that you can teach, or you can acquire those skills. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, that's such a great question, because everybody holds an assumption about that, I believe. But I think that you can learn how to become a great manager. You don't need to be born. We talk about people are born with charisma, and some people just don't exude that as much as other people. But being a great manager, you can learn the skills that are important to become a great manager and connect with your people. And they're very simple things that sometimes we take for granted. How to have one-on-ones consistently, how to lead team meetings, how to motivate people, how to help people use their strengths, things that we're going to talk about today more. And I think you can really learn to be a really great manager if you put your mind to it and you learn from others. Because what happens, I think, Jolene, is that we learn how to manage from our manager, if you've had managers in the past. And if you did not have a good manager, you don't have a role model for what to do. And that creates a real challenge and a problem. And then all of a sudden you have a good manager and you say, wow, this feels so much different. I can get more done. I feel more like getting up in the morning and going to work is a very cool thing, instead of, oh no, another day at work. So we have the option to become really great managers.
It's so true. That kind of refers back to that ripple effect. Once you have great managers in the business, then there's that ripple effect. And you can tell managers that have been through, back to your point about being taught versus those natural abilities. You can tell people that have been through some training to be great managers. It comes out in simple questions that they ask you. Well, they ask questions for starters.
Number one, right?
How can I help? And I know not to jump forward too much, but I mean, one of the key behaviors of those truly great managers is being interested in your employees. I remember being at school and being amazed that my headmaster, I think it's principal in the school, knew the names of every pupil. It just astounded me. And I did a video recently, a couple of months ago, about how, many years ago, I was blown away by the fact that my manager remembered the names of my wife and my children. I told him months ago, but it really demonstrated to me that he was interested and he cared, and that makes a difference.
That's such a great point, Chris. Yeah. One of the questions, we do a 360 when we start a coaching engagement, and we ask, do you know the names of team members, like two closest relatives or friends? And some people say, wow, that's a very personal question to ask. But it's really important, because if I know that somebody is caring for an elderly parent, or they have a young child that might be ill, that is going to impact their work. And I want to be an empathetic manager and leader and check in on that. So knowing a bit about that, like knowing this manager, it impressed Chris so much, knowing his wife's name and children's name, it keeps you connected more strongly. And we can't have that standoffish approach anymore. This isn't control and direct things. This is really, we're all in this together, and we really need to understand each other and know where we come from.
Nice. So already some very good insights. I think we're already starting to touch a little bit upon the next slide, and what are these key behaviors, or the behaviors that a manager should focus on. So one of the things we talked about is already showing an interest, listening to your to your employee or to your direct report. Wendy, what are some other things, or if you dive a little bit more deeper into one of these key behaviors, what do you think is important?
Well, I think I love the fact that the research came out with number one is to be a good coach, because that was really a surprising finding, I think, for Google back in the day. And they have since looked at this research again, and it's still up there, that being a good coach is important. And being a good coach doesn't always come naturally to people. Like, that's a skill that needs to be learned. You have to practice how to be a good listener, asking good questions. I'm really standing back, helping people find their own answers, but then also adding value to the conversation. So it takes some practice, because I think all around the world, we're a bit of teleholics. We like to just tell people what to do. It's much easier and it's quicker. But if you stand back and coach people and ask them, what are you trying to achieve? What would a good outcome be? It really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think we as I talk, daily to HR directors around the world, I know that many of you on this call will be wanting to create coaching cultures within the business, which is obviously a great place to start. We'll be talking a bit more about that as we move through. But creating that coaching culture within the business also enables managers to be good coaches, or vice versa, actually.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's that trickle down effect that you mentioned, Chris, is that if your manager is a good coach, you will learn coaching skills and be a good coach. And then you will also work with your colleagues and help. A coaching culture is that people are able to give feedback, ask questions, really be there for each other. So I think it makes such a difference. The more that they tell two people and they tell two people, that you spread that out through an organization, you'll see a difference in happiness, productivity, and many other factors that we're all looking for to happen in business. We spend way too much time at work not to feel productive and fun and being able to use our strengths.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. And especially if you go through these behaviors, and we have not mentioned to the audience before, but we will try to focus a little bit more on the first 6 behaviors. They're all important, but there's more to discuss than just the behaviors itself. We also want to talk a little bit about the process. So when we talked before, you also spoke about the importance of praise and giving praise.
Yes, I think that is an underused resource that we have, being able to recognize excellence and praise it, being able to tell people from a neuroscience standpoint, which we kind of try to put out there a lot at Better Manager, because it helps people understand the why. If you praise somebody for what they've done, their oxytocin and dopamine will go up, like, wow, that felt good to get that kind of recognition. And they'll want to do that again. And it just is, it's a great practice, and it doesn't cost us anything, yet a lot of managers don't utilize it.
Yeah.
Same with like looking at somebody's strengths. If we work from our strengths and not always all day trying to work from something that's hard and that we don't know, not that we shouldn't do anything that we're not good at, but having an opportunity to use our strengths, it's not like work. I know that Chris is so good at what he does. It's a strength that he has. So it's easy for him to talk to people all the time.
That's so nice. Thank you.
And how does, go Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, that recognizing excellence and praising it as one of the key behaviors, once again, it has that ripple effect. If managers model this behavior, then what you will see in the organization is that peers will praise peers, and that should absolutely be encouraged, because it's, of course, we love to get praise from our managers, but sometimes we obviously we recognize that our peers are sometimes working closely with us within projects or within meetings, so receiving that praise is important. But yeah, I think, I'm not sure whether you mentioned this, Wendy, but sometimes being able to have systems in place to enable that as well, so you can have people, so it's visible within the organization, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
it's very, very interesting that you mentioned that. As a manager, we of course through praise, we use a lot of praise ourselves. But what I think I learned, especially from a culture perspective, I'm very Dutch and very direct, and I've always learned to give feedback, positive or negative, to somebody directly. Whereas I learned to working with different cultures that a praise sometimes is better even to be written out, because there are different cultures who are way more open to receiving feedback or face-to-face or written down. But that was the thing for me that really resonated with, like, even with these key behaviors, it differs very much where you're from and how you actually can apply these.
Absolutely.
A good manager will ask members of their team, how do you like to receive praise? Some people love to be called out in the middle of a meeting and, given, even on Zoom, a standing ovation, and others don't want that, that please don't call me out. And some companies set up Slack channels that are like a praise or gratitude channel. So there are many different ways to do it, but find out what works for your people. It's not about you, it's about your team and the people you serve.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Then one last question before we go actually to the next topic of this webinar. Is more around how this is, if you look at key behaviors and you look at managers, what advice would you give, and both of you can answer this one, would you give HR managers that now with remote working are struggling to get connectivity with their direct reports, because it's all online and it's way harder to actually use these skills when you're not seeing somebody face to face?
Yes, I find we do a lot of coaching around this, and I'm sure all of you around the globe, are feeling the stress. That's why we're so happy you're here today, that you're not zoomed out and you've joined us live, because that's what managers have to be careful of. Before, when you were in an office, you'd be able to feel if there was energy that was getting depleted.
Exactly.
And now it's really hard to feel that. So check in with people. In the beginning, we used to get complaints that they said, my manager is checking in with me 10 times a day to make sure I'm okay, because they didn't know how to handle it. Now they're backing up a little bit and saying, yep, because we don't want to be on Zoom all day. And we check in, make sure people are all right. But personally, people have a lot of challenges right now remotely. They're homeschooling children. They're taking care of, other family members. So we have to make sure that we're making that happen.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I something that and maybe this was at the beginning of the pandemic, but a lot of managers, and this speaks to point 3 of a key behavior of not micromanaging. So I think a lot of managers kind of dialed right over to, you know, loads of check-ins, and it kind of got a bit micromanaging instead of empowering. So, you know, I think that's improving, but managers still need to keep that in check, that they're not micromanaging. In fact, Wendy, there's that nice analogy that the coaches use a lot. Dance floor, balcony. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, that's
a nice one.
Yeah, this has been so useful for us that when you're working, you're on the dance floor. If you picture being on a dance floor, you can only see people that are right around you. You can't see other things that are going on. And this is a analogy about you're kind of busy doing the work there. But if you go up to the balcony and look down, you're able to see more of what's going on. You see who's in one side of the room, another side of the room, and you get a different perspective. So managers need to bring their people, you know, up to the balcony to be able to understand, like, where's the company going? What's the why? What's the context? And so we use that a lot, because if you're just on the dance floor, and sometimes it's like if you are just at home sitting on Zoom doing your work, you don't get that balcony perspective. So managers need to come in and share that with people. And I think that really will make for, number 6, productive and results oriented. If we don't understand the why and the context of our work and why it's important and how we can personally contribute, it's going to be very hard to move things forward. So I think that's a good analogy and metaphor for everybody to remember as they go forward.
So get on the balcony every now and then.
Get on the balcony and bring some people with you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, nice. I think we have some great learnings already, but for the sake of time, let's dive a little bit into the next subject. For everybody listening, Better Manager created an awesome ebook on this, which will be shared also at the end of the webinar. So there's an ebook actually on these 12 key behaviors, which you all can get the chance to read. So for now, let's actually go to the next topic, which is how HR can put the right processes into place to start coaching managers to success. So Chris, what are your thoughts on this? You talk with so many HR leaders, managers. How do you think they should approach this?
Yeah, so now we're kind of moving from, you know, looking at those behaviors to how do we put processes in place to start coaching managers towards those best practices, those best behaviors. And I would say, I think that the most important starting point is, how to begin this. The most important starting point is setting the tone for how, you know, if you're going to implement coaching within the organization, and management coaching is setting the tone for that. And what I mean is that coaching should never be seen as remedial. So I think a good starting point is how you set the tone as developmental, as a reward, maybe, and make sure that we set the tone around the fact that everybody has room for development. As you rightly said, I mean, I talk to heads of HR and heads of learning day in and day out, and especially when we're talking about coaching, people will often have people in mind within the organization, but it tends to be people that they think need fixing. That is definitely not the right process. So you know, it shouldn't be about fixing people. It should be about, you know, giving people those coaching opportunities to develop. And it might sound like an obvious thing to say, but as part of the process, I would definitely start with that.
Yeah,
nice.
I love that perspective that you always share with HR leaders, Chris, because it is about investing in your people. If you want to start a coaching engagement and you pick people that are clearly having challenges, and then you put them up first for coaching, people are going to look at them and say, oh, this coaching thing, it's for people that are needing fixing or not working well. Instead, we always ask HR people to say, for the first group of people that you're going to have, ask people to raise their hand. Because then if you raise your hand and you're in this, you know, you'll get as much out of coaching as you put into it. Coaching is a one-on-one partnership with somebody who's going to be your thought partner and help you solve some issues. And it's not, I had my first career was in education. So I always think of, if you're not good, you get sent to the principal's office. That's not how you want to look at coaching, being sent to the principal's office. You want to, that my company cares deeply about me. And so they want to invest in me, And one of the best ways to invest, you can train people on specific skills. And then this personal investment is about coaching and your personal leadership. Because if Chris and I were being coached by the same coach, we'd have different issues that we were working on, that we wanted to set a vision for. And coaches do that really well, helping you set a vision for where you want to go. And then what's that gap that we need to close to get you there?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Wendy, what else? So the common question that's also asked is, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? So I'm always interested to see, because especially a lot of people have a specific belief with what coaching actually is, but how do you look at this?
Yeah, it does get combined, and we often hear coach, mentor, therapist, they're all kludged together, and they're very, very different. A coach is somebody who sets that vision for you, helps you create a path, and is a great thought partner, asks you really powerful questions to help you think different. Maybe not think different, but think more deeply about some of the issues that you're facing. A mentor to me is somebody inside a company, it could also be outside a company, that knows the kind of work that you do and can give you specific feedback on, here's what I did in my career, or here's somebody that you can talk to. I'm going to send you as your mentor. I'm going to suggest, if you want to really learn about sales, I'm going to introduce you to Chris, and you can have a conversation with Chris and see what you can learn from them. So it's very different than having a coach and having a mentor. And a lot of people now are needing some mental health services. There's people that have really been struggling through this pandemic, and there are times to know when you want to talk with a therapist who is going to really stand back and help you. And I always look at coaching as looking ahead, and therapy sometimes is looking how you got to where you are and then how you're going to get out of that. So it's a little bit more looking back in your rearview mirror.
Yeah, and Chris, oh no, sorry, go.
No, go on.
I was more also interested because, especially as HR, it's sometimes very hard to get buy-in for anything. But of course, also for coaching, because there is this conception that coaching is only for people that are struggling. So how can HR actually get buy-in to create a coaching in the organization?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it is a part of the process, because many on the call, on the webinar, will kind of instinctively know, intuitively know that coaching can be valuable to the organization, but starting, and this is really as part of the process, and it should be at the beginning of the process, is thinking about, before you invest too much time in putting a grand plan in place, is start to think about, right, at some point I'm going to have to go and get funding to implement this grand plan. And you know what, I mean, this is not rocket science, but I think taking the time to start revisiting the strategic objectives of the organization, starting to align how your coaching intervention, and really this could be for any learning intervention really, but make sure that it's really connected to the achievement of those strategic goals of the business. Excuse me, because as you're putting a business case together, you really want to open up with that connectivity, so that whomever, if you haven't got ownership of the budget and you need to go and source funding, that you're representing how this is going to help achieve those sales numbers, or bring down the staff turnover, whatever it might be. But that's a critical starting point.
Nice.
And I was just going to, in terms of the process, I just wanted to say one other thing, which I think is really important. And again, I think this is for coaching, but it could be for other learning interventions as well. I think one of the challenges that I hear coming back at me from HR and learning is, you know, I implemented, or I put this plan together, but now I'm challenged around finding coaches. It's not that straightforward, because, you know, as with a supplier of any services, you know, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of coaches around the world. Really what you want to do early is identify partners, you know, whether that's individual coaches, but you know, you want to get that lineup in place, whether it's identifying a partner that has those coaches, or you're going off and getting you know, a bench of people. I would start doing that early in the process and start thinking about, okay, maybe we've just got a population of managers in Canada or Scotland, but maybe it's global, because then once you start telling people about this in the organization, you have to be ready for that pull of demand, and you want it to be successful. I've always felt that HR and learning heads can use suppliers much more than they do. You know, there's a lot of knowledge inside those suppliers. I sometimes feel like HR heads and learning heads can, you know, don't worry about engaging with the salespeople, you know, that they're going to be constantly on your back for selling stuff. There's a lot of deep knowledge in all of those organizations that you can use, and they're really happy to offer advice and learnings.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great insights. Great insights.
Yeah. And those coaches that, you know, that we talk about, you got to make sure that you vet them well if you're bringing on individual coaches. You know, we have such high standards at Better Manager that people need to be certified. You know, they need to have gone to a certified school for coaching, be ICF certified if that's appropriate in the country. They also have to have 10 years. We have coaches with 20 years business experience. So you want to have coaches that really know business. So if you're partnering with people, make sure they have that kind of combination of being a really good coach and really understanding business. So I think that's important. And there are companies that use internal coaches, which is great. You know, if you have, that's part of what Chris talked about before, having a coaching culture. You know, some HR people are certified coaches, and you can go there. But I think there's also a really good case for having internal and external coaches. We often get feedback that says, you know, I'm really appreciative that my company brought on an external company, because not only is it feel really safe to be able to have any conversation, because you have to always be worried if you're making some comments about your manager, trying to figure out how to manage up. You want to make sure that you're in a safe space to figure that type of thing out, and be able to make sure that you're also learning. Not everybody's doing the same thing. You can learn new things from people. And our coaches, because they've coached thousands of people, I learn from my people that I coach all the time. Here's a better way to do things. And then I can pass it on to somebody else. So it's a great way to plant those seeds.
Nice. Yeah. Just for the sake of time, we have one more topic to discuss, and also a very important topic. And we've touched upon it already a little bit, of course, but if you look at the processes that we discussed previously, they take a little bit of time, especially if you really want to create coaching within the organization, get buy-in, set up coaches, vet the coaches. Everything takes a lot of time. So we just want to touch upon shortly also, what could HR do right now in order to bring coaching into their organization. Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Hey, look, there's a really simple way, and well, there's a few different ways, but you know, if you're sitting there thinking, or you have been thinking about, you know, bringing coaching into the business, then start with yourself. You know, it's a really, you know, many of you probably manage people. We've all got room to grow. And not only does it give you, you know, by going through that process yourself, so get yourself a coach, go through some kind of program. It will give you huge it will give you huge benefits, full stop, but it's going to give you huge insights into what may or may not work within the context of your organization. You're typically not talking about a huge financial investment, and it also enables you to, through those insights, become a true champion for the coaching, because you'll learn a lot about the value of it. So I always recommend, why not start with yourself? And that's a really practical, easy way just to do it.
Yeah, and
Nice.
and often senior leadership always has the opportunity to have coaches, and very experienced coaches that have worked in the industry a long time. But what we have found is that middle managers, and many companies call it the big middle because there's more middle managers in a company than there are senior executive people and new managers. They seem to be put on the job after you become a new manager and you've worked for a while. You're a little bit stuck in the middle without a lot of training and a lot of support. So being able to have a cost-effective way to bring more coaches on is really important. And I love Chris's thought about, if you can speak to things much easier if you have experienced it. And also if you're trying to talk to your executives about what the process was like, even the whole technical process of what a company has available to them, what kind of leadership platform. When you can speak from your experience and you had a good experience, then I think you're better equipped to be able to bring on coaching to your organization, no matter whether it's individual coaches or partnering with a company like Better Manager.
So
go, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, as another practical tactic, coaching managers does not have to sit off to the side of what you're doing already. So another very practical tactic that we recommend and we see organizations doing is to maybe look at existing leadership programs and think about where coaching interventions, beginning, middle, end, it's a soft but impactful way to start introducing people in the organization to coaching, into existing leadership programs. So, I hear this sort of thing all the time, but a classic case in point a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to an HR director. They just finished I think they called it their Emerging Leaders Program or New Leaders Program, something along those lines. And they had surveyed the participants at the end of this course, so it had a definitive end. And a lot of the people said, "Well, what now? It just finished." So a lot of them were putting their hands up and saying, we would really like some coaching. In fact, that's another good tactic. Go out, ask people, to put their hands up. It's a great way to start, especially if you're looking for those early evangelists. You could go through coaching yourself and then go out, ask the business, get people to put their hands up, and it starts to happen.
Yeah, nice. And adding a couple of coaching sessions to a leadership program helps people apply what they've learned. Because I think that's what we miss sometimes when we go into training. We go into training, but then research shows that you only use a small percentage of what you learned because you get back into work right away. So if you want to be able to apply those learnings and then have a few coaching sessions to practice that and debrief with your coach, it's a great way to jump in the pool.
Nice. So one last question before we actually dive into the bigger pool of questions. We spoke now about leadership programs. People are already part of becoming a leader or already are a manager. What can HR do for first-time managers? Because, of course, I think a lot of the struggle for first-time managers lies in coaching because they don't have experienced it before, and there's a lot coming towards them at the same time because their role completely changes. What could HR do to actually help them?
So I can
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, go on.
Well, new managers, it's often you don't know what you don't know. And as a new manager, you're used to doing the work and being an individual contributor. And now you have the responsibility of working through others. So there is certainly some new manager training people can take advantage of, so they know what are the good things that they talk about in Google Project Oxygen that I need to learn, how to suss out people's strengths, how to bring people together, how to praise them for what's going on and give feedback and give constructive feedback. So there's that. And then there's really being able to give somebody a coach to get them off on the right foot, so that if you have questions on what you're doing with your team, and you can share that with somebody and have that thought partner who works with you. So I think it's a great thing for new managers also.
Yeah, I agree.
Chris.
Well, I agree fully. I mean, the best time to start. I would say that a question that comes up a lot for me when people are thinking about how to implement and integrate coaching is that it's just going to be prohibitively expensive, because most people think about coaching from an executive standpoint. You know, it's $1,000 per hour or whatever. You know, there's no way that we could scale this to that body of new managers or the whole organization. And I would say that does not necessarily have to be the case. You know, we see many organizations that manage to scale coaching to hundreds, thousands of people. And I would also say that having been in learning delivery for many, many years, we've all talked about the need for personalization, you know, because, and this is especially important when we're thinking about those key behaviors and wanting to, you know, develop leaders and managers towards living those key behaviors. You know, it can become difficult when you're just trying to train them as a group. And I think coaching is well, I believe we should definitely sort of, and this is an overused term, but we should democratize access to that type of personalized development that was usually the preserve of the senior execs.
Yeah.
And, you know, certainly for those first time managers or any of them really, this type of intervention is really the only way to give truly personalized development, because we're all whole individuals, you know, and many of the things that are holding a manager or a leader back may not be entirely work related. You know, it's about they're bringing themselves to work, and coaching gives that kind of safe space to develop the whole person.
Yes. Great insights and answers. I love this. But for the sake of time, I know there are a lot of questions coming in, and also a lot of people are on the chat, which is amazing, by the way. Thank you guys for engaging on the chat, asking questions, but also just engaging with each other. We also saw that there are a lot of first-time managers also actually watching this, so that's great as well. So let's start actually with the questions. What I wanted to do was actually stop sharing the presentation for a bit, so that people can actually see our face a little bit more. Or let me see if I can actually make this a little bit bigger, so actually people can see who are we when we ask these questions. So hopefully we can get through all your questions. You can indeed vote them up. So if you have a feeling that there's a question that's very important to you, please click on the vote button, so I will make sure that those get answers. Question from Nick. Raising your hand to be coached is a great idea. How do you promote that behavior? How do you create that safe zone where people feel safe to raise their hand? Who of you would like to answer that question?
I can have a go at that. You know, there's different tactics, but I would potentially start, and again, it's about, you want people to be demonstrating that behavior so that others will model it. So it's a great place to start by going and asking directors first, or you know, senior leaders and directors, if you know, get them to put their hands up first. Others will see that and you know, start to, and other managers within the business will start to put their hands up for it. But I think it's also about being careful about how you again, going back to that original thing of setting the scene for this being a gift, a developmental gift, that it's seen in that light, and people will put their hands up for it.
Yeah.
Nice. I like
Another way to spread what coaching is, because some people may not want to raise their hand because they're not exactly sure what this coaching thing is about. We've offered to do lunch and learns with companies, you know, have people there. I've done that many times and done a coaching demo with the HR leader. And so they could watch the coaching and say, oh, that's what it's about. And then people are more likely. So whoever you're working with, you know, have them come into the organization and on Zoom and do a little webinar and do a coaching demo, and then say, who is interested in having our company invest in you? Yeah.
And you may also, this is a final point, some of you may have internal systems like learning management systems or other, well, everyone's got systems, you know, of some kind. So making sure that it's visible on there as an option. And, you know, that's another great way to do it.
Nice. Great answers. There also, I see some couple of manager questions also in there, which is very interesting. So the biggest upvoted question is actually around, how can you tell if you're micromanaging? Wendy.
Well, you can tell if your people try to hide from you because they can't get enough done because you're just on top of them. You really, micromanaging is when you just need to build more trust. You need to kind of let out the rope a little bit, you know? And if you need to learn how not to micromanage, say, I'm going to give this task. Some people aren't as good at delegating. I'm going to give somebody this project to do, but don't just throw it over the fence. Say, so what are you looking for? What help can I give you? What support can I give you? And ask them, and then say, when's a good time that we might check back and see how you're doing, so that somebody doesn't maybe take a left when they should have taken a right. But work together as partners to set that pace so that you know you're not micromanaging. But trust is a key element. We need to trust, and it's coming up a lot now, Jolene, because people are working at home. I don't know if people think people are sitting around, you know, eating chocolate and not working, but my experience is that people are working even more. So trust your people and figure out a way to connect on that.
Yeah, I think especially like for me, asking questions is the best. So don't be afraid to ask your report what he or she needs. Sometimes they need more micromanaging, but then in a good way. So they need more support. And on the other way, sometimes you have somebody who doesn't like the micromanaging and just wants to be left alone to do their work, and sometimes get a pat on the back. So it depends very much also what I've experienced, depending on who your direct report is. I have a lot of other questions, so we need to go through them a little bit quicker. So especially now, we talked about remote, and that remote is actually so hard to check in with your direct reports or have a better feel of connectivity. So the question of Lucas is, what advice would you give to a manager to effectively check in on their employees' mental health and encourage them to communicate their needs or limitations?
I think the important part about that is really demonstrating that you care. Say, I understand. You know, empathetic managers and leaders are going to get the most from their people because they know they truly care. And to say things like, gosh, I understand this must be tough for you right now. You know, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Don't just step over it. And make sure that you ask in a way that's appropriate. And we talked about culture before. You know, some people are going to be a little bit more guarded, but make sure you ask, how are you? You know, how can I support you? And I understand that this is a difficult time for people. Sometimes when you acknowledge up front that it's hard, people will say, yeah, it is hard. And you could get deeper into that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, and we've probably all experienced this, you know, that you know, maybe one of the positive things out of this pandemic situation is that we've all been welcomed into each other's homes. And, I mean, I used to tell my kids to stay in their room. But now they're wandering around, not right now, but, and I think those barriers have gone down a lot more. So I think it allows managers to be, I don't know, this probably isn't the right word, but more emotionally vulnerable themselves, there's nothing wrong in talking about those challenges that you have. It can be done in a soft, subtle way as well,
It's a great point. Yeah. Be vulnerable yourself. That's a great way to be able to engage your team. Yeah.
That's where it starts, actually, yes. I think. Yeah, I agree. There's one other question, which is a little bit is a follow-up to this one, and this is more around how actually there's such an emphasis on managers being perfect and needing to do all these 12 key behaviors. But how can managers protect themselves? And I think also for a lot of HR leaders, how can they help regarding protecting their managers a little bit from so many people are on burnout leave or are nearing a burnout. So how can managers themselves, but also HR, protect them a little bit?
Resilience, Yeah.
Building your own resilience, that expression that they always use in airlines, like put on your oxygen mask first, is really relevant here. That you need to take care of yourself if you're going to be able to take care of others. And making sure that you take time. We talked about the dance floor and the balcony. You also go up to the balcony to reflect. I've coached so many managers lately, and it's about having a practice, like either in the morning or at night or both, where you stand back and you reflect, and maybe you do some meditation. I have one person that I've coached who says, I can't turn off my brain. And he's learned if I pick up a nonfiction book that interests me and read it 30 minutes before to go to bed, I can kind of let go of my work and then sleep better. So take care of yourself first, and then you'll be able to help others. But whatever, it's a different practice for all of us. So you have to find what fits you. But there's so much research out there. So look at some of those and see. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions on that too, if people want to send an email.
Yes. So in the next slide, I can actually put it up before we run out of time and people don't see it. Here are all the details. If you want to send each of us specific questions that you want to answer to, you can reach out to any of us. Next question, more about the onboarding now during COVID. So how do you onboard new people, and especially also with HR managers, how can they do that effectively? Do you guys have some insights to share on that?
I think onboarding is even more important. And I've heard some fantastic stories about onboarding. Some companies, when you're bringing on someone, you used to welcome in the office, maybe they'd have a cake, they'd celebrate that they were there. Some companies are sending a big care package with, some things about the company, maybe a mug, things to make you feel part of it. Because we've got to make sure that we can make people feel part of that onboarding. Connect them with others, maybe connect them with a buddy. Have somebody in the company that, there's always at a company the rules are secret, and, you don't know until you break them, because nobody has a chance to tell you everything. So have somebody that you can say, Jolene, how does this really work at the company? Because I really don't want to ask my manager right now.
We actually have that at Impress as well. So you have a buddy, and it's never your manager if you are onboarded. It really helps, because sometimes you're just scared to ask your manager, especially if you're not used to a very open culture where you can actually ask your manager for help.
Right. And your buddy might say, you can ask your manager, I'm going to tell you too, but then begin to build the courage to say, this is a real open culture here, and this is how we do it. But it's really nice to have somebody there. It's really nice to have those little things maybe show up at your door. I'm finding that sending people snail mail, cards and things are even appreciated more than ever, because we got to get off email and screens sometimes. And I know I get something a lot of tangible cards. Yes, something that you can hold on to. So there's a lot of those practices that really will make onboarding easier.
Nice. Then what the last question, sorry guys, I know there are more, but you can all send us an email if you really want these questions answered. And there's also a lot of content that we'll show you. One last question. What's the difference between a manager and a leader?
I think a manager manages process, and we need to manage process, but a leader inspires and motivates and is able to help set a vision. A manager will help get stuff done, and a leader will help you set the vision, explain the why and the context to get there. So I think I really look at the two of them as they need to be combined. You need to be a good manager and know process, and you need to be a good leader and motivate your people and inspire them and make work is such a big part of our life. We want to make it something that I feel joyous at the end of the day. Even though I'm getting zoomed out, I feel joyous. And another piece on that, I have managers, I always say, if you're going to do a one-on-one with somebody, do it on the phone now, and you each go out for a walk. If you're in a place that you can go walk, do it on the phone and talk to that person. We need to get out in the air. We need to do things. So be innovative on how you're doing maybe the practices that you know you should do, but think about a different way of doing them.
Yeah. And I would end by sharing one other tip that I saw recently, because I think managers are trying to, build that resilience, and so are your teams. And we're all working, it seems like we're working more than ever. It's stretching off into the evenings, the weekends, etc. And we have to be careful about that. I saw someone put something very nice in their email signature a couple of weeks ago, which is a practice that I'm thinking to adopt as well, which just said, it was, an email came across at the weekend, and it just, in her signature, it just said, I work flexibly at the moment. I'm not expecting a response. Because I think, we're all experiencing that it's coming in. It's a way to just sort of, take the pressure out of that situation, that we're all getting pinged constantly. And I think that's a nice practice for the organization to implement, that we're not expecting immediate responses.
Nice. I love this last great tip. Sadly, we have to end this. I know we can talk for at least 2-3 more hours. Thank you all for joining. I hope you had some great insights. If you really need extra information, please don't be shy. Send us an email. We will all send you an email also with the recording of this and also with additional content. So thank you again. Thank you also for the questions and the engagement. I think it was a great event. And thank you, Wendy and Chris as well for this event. Thank you so much. It was really a really great chat.
Yes. Thank you, Jolene. Thank you for having us. And Chris, as always, it's wonderful to work together.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Have a great day or evening.
You too.
Yes.